Hello everybody and welcome to our webinar today on defending education and navigating cybersecurity challenges. My name is Adam Mize, I'm the Sales Director here at CyberLab and I'll be hosting today's Q&A panel. Before I start, we've got an upcoming event in partnership with Lancaster University, which is on human and AI intelligence and cyber risk. It's on November the 19th in Manchester at Dish. And today we have a panel of leading cyber professionals to answer some of your questions. So firstly, John Hope from Sophos, do you want to maybe just introduce yourself and your role at Sophos?
Of course, yeah, thank you, Adam. Yeah, so my name is John Hope. I'm Senior Technology Evangelist at Sophos. Basically means I get to talk in public and on webinars just like this, all around the research we conduct into the cyber threat and also talking about our products and services and how we help. Let's try that again. So my name is John Hope. I'm Senior Technology Evangelist at Sophos, and it's my role essentially to take some of the interesting research that we do and translate that through into how those threats impact people in the real world. And of course, most importantly, talk about the products and services we offer at Sophos and how they help organisations to stay secure.
Amazing, thanks John. And Andrew Baird from Mimecast.
Yeah, sure thing. So yeah, hi everybody, Andy Beard at Mimecast. I'm a sales engineer here at Mimecast. I'm actually coming up for my 12th year of service here. I spent my first 5 years roughly at Mimecast working in the engineering teams, working as something like as technical lead, third line support, getting to understand the products at right down to the code and infrastructure level. And then I took all of that knowledge and moved it into the go-to-market team to become a sales engineer. And it's been an excellent combination of skills to put together and has really put me in a great position where I get to speak to professionals at the moment focused on housing and education all across the country and, make sure that we understand their technical requirements so that we can actually architect the right solution for their needs.
Amazing, thank you. And Mark Lowings from Forescout.
Yeah, hi, my name's Mark Lowings. I'm a system engineer or sales engineer, same sort of thing, I guess, here at Forescout. I've been here just over sort of 2.5 years. But and I work with a lot of our sales account teams, trying to talking to customers, trying to understand some of their requirements, listening to their problems that they have, and helping them with Forescout to try and address those issues around network security, cyber security, because our platform sort of operates at both of those levels. And it's been a great journey for me. I've been very enjoyable.
That's one, love the passion, Mark. Innes on LogPoint.
Hi everyone, Innes Muir, Regional Sales Manager for MSSP business here at LogPoint, that being Managed Security Service Providers. Been with LogPoint for the last 4 years and focusing specifically on the recruitment and development of our managed security providers. We're seeing a bit of a shift now over the last probably sort of 4 or 5 years where organisations, certainly within the public sector, through lack of resources, budgets, and indeed the kind of cloud sort of first policy, they're now looking at external partners to be able to deliver a variety of sort of outcome-based security services, and LogPoint is a key component within that environment. So very good to meet you all today.
Amazing, thank you, Innes. And Darren Leach from Secure Envoy.
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, my name is Darren Leach. I'm the sales manager here at Secure Envoy. We are a UK cybersecurity vendor, and we focus across anything from MFA, access management, and single sign-on. And we do have a very strong focus on helping public sector, which includes education, with their identity and MFA challenges. As some of the other members have mentioned, there's an increased requirement challenges from sort of budgets and resource, but I think identity is a key thing for within education at the moment, and that's a key focus for us, and be keen to discuss that on the session today.
Amazing, thank you. A great panel to join us today. So the first question, what are the biggest cybersecurity threats facing educational institutions today? And maybe John from Sophos, do you want to lead that question off?
Yeah, be delighted. So the perhaps unimaginative answer is that ransomware is and continues to be the biggest challenge in any sector, but particularly in education, actually. If you look at some of the research we conduct, we do a state of ransomware report every year, which involves interviewing a number of network administrators, IT managers, budget holders in all verticals all across the world. And if you look at the outcome from 2023, education was actually the most popular sector in terms of the cyber criminals targeting victims in that particular vertical. It's not quite the same anymore. So we've seen a bit of a reduction from around about 80% likelihood of being hit by ransomware down to, I'm going to say, just 63%, but that still means that it's a very tough market out there and a tough challenge for organizations to stay secure. That's the quicker answer. The longer answer is it's not just the fact that ransomware is a highly prevalent problem, but it's actually the way that the cyber criminals are executing their ransomware attacks. So we're increasingly seeing the cyber criminals utilizing living off the land techniques, which is essentially hacker speak for using legitimate IT tools against an organization. And this presents a massive problem for the teams that protect those organizations and cybersecurity vendors like us, because we're moving from a world where attacks are file-based and they're malware-based to the cyber criminals actually being active hands-on keyboard and utilizing legitimate IT tools, things like RDP, things like PowerShell against organizations. And this is really difficult because these are legitimate IT tools. Organizations need to use them as part of their workflow. But now we live in a reality where we know at any moment those same tools could actually be used against an organization. And it becomes very difficult for technology on its own to really distinguish the difference between legitimate use of these tools versus the cyber criminals using them in a malicious fashion.
Amazing. Thank you, John. That's yeah, great take on things. So Andy from Mimecast, maybe your take on that question?
Absolutely, yeah. So from an email perspective, I actually recently looked into this, and we noticed that there was a large number of our customers reporting phishing-based attacks or have a concern with phishing in general. And some data that really backs that up is the UK government's cybersecurity breaches survey from 2024, where within that they actually analysed, the types of threats that have caused a breach in education organisations, and phishing was by far and away, confirmed to be the actual dominant threat. And in fact, education is actually more at risk statistically. We see that 84% of average UK businesses reported a phishing-based breach. But when we put that into education, primary schools 92%, secondary schools 89%, further education 97%, and higher education 100% of all of the higher education institutions that were surveyed admitted that they had been the victim of a phishing attack. So it definitely is still extremely prolific in the education world compared to other sectors, but prolific in general across all businesses. Backing that up is impersonation. So interestingly, the next statistic was impersonation, the next most prolific breach type. And that's not any surprise to me at all, because what we see very commonly is that some sort of social engineering will precede a successful phishing attack. And the type of social engineering and other things that are being used kind of moves me on to my next part of the answer to that question, which is the more modern threats. So things like phishing impersonation have been around for a very long time, and there are lots of very robust tools out there that can, that you can buy in order to combat that. But then when we start to look into things like, for example, brand impersonation, people actually successfully impersonating major brands, both in hosted websites and in emails. QR codes is another massive threat on the rise, especially with education institutions. A lot of education institutions are suffering with BYOD problems. Lots of students, for example, are all BYOD, and trying to kind of control those devices and keep them secure is becoming increasingly difficult. And when it comes to QR codes, everyone's got that black rectangle in their pocket, and it's just a simple case of picking it up and scanning it. And when you look at things like QR codes have replaced menus in restaurants, it's very easy to just go around a restaurant, stick a few QR code stickers over the top of the existing ones and lead people, into a bit of a honeypot there, into a trap. So yeah, it's extremely important that we think about these more advanced attacks, especially one that's big on the rise is payloadless attacks as well. The idea that we can just construct an email that is written so very well using things like senses of urgency, colloquialisms, etc., to make it seem extremely believable, and asking someone to take an action, like, here are my bank details, please make the transfer urgently. There's no link to click on, there's no malware, attachment to open, and that is becoming a big risk for businesses in education especially.
Amazing. What a great response. Yeah, we actually offer the Mimecast threat scan as well, don't we, Andy? So that's something that anybody on this call is sort of, if you want to get in touch with any of the team at CyberLab, we can sort of set that up, and it'll just essentially sort of highlight those email-based attacks and what's getting through. And it's a good way just to sort of see if there's any extra tools that are needed to support keeping your organization secure. So thank you very much. Second question. So educational institutions have a wide range of devices such as laptops, tablets, smartphones, and IoT devices that connect to their networks. What threat does this pose, and how can the risk be reduced? And maybe Mark from Forescout, if you maybe take that first question.
Yeah, sure. It's an interesting question. So within Forescout, we have Videra Labs. They're our research arm. And this team is tracking around 781 threat actors at the moment, out of which 76 of them, sort of 10% of them, are actually targeting education institutes. And most of these originate from China, Russia, Iran, the usual suspects. And they're mostly sort of state sponsored as well, and they're motivated by espionage and financial gain as well. And they're normally getting access in for that type of attack through network devices. So these sort of devices sitting on the edge, badly managed, those kinds of things. Also, as we just heard, a large proportion of also ransomware as well. And in fact, showing from our studies, probably educational institutes are the 9th highest sector being attacked by ransomware as well. So I guess the question is, why is education being focused on? So in our experience, education institutes normally have very complex departmentalized networks. They have a very large variety of device types on their networks as well, and that's just a result of the sort of type of work they do, the research they're doing, the data they have, that sort of research data, and the types of users they have as well. And in fact, our research shows again that normally, on average, these networks have over 21,000 devices on them. They normally have over 11 different vendors and models, 11,000 vendors and models of network, 400 different operating systems and versions. So it's obviously very, very complex and very, very difficult to manage. And out of those, probably only 50% of those are IT managed devices, stuff that has some sort of endpoint protection sitting on them. So, a lot of those other stuff can be exposing the business or the institute to a lot of risk. So in that case, it's really important to have really good device visibility, classification. And what I mean by that is, what is the operating system those devices are running? What's the vendor and model that those devices are, and what sort of function as well are they doing on the network? That's vital, and that's also sort of feeds into a lot of those security frameworks as well. That's very important. They're all asking you to know exactly what's sitting on your network. So to help this, Forescout has ability to control access based on trust levels. Do these devices have certificates on them to prove who they are? Can they be accessed by corporate credentials? Can we assess them to make sure they've got the right agents installed? Do they have firewalls up and running? Do they have endpoint protection installed and running? Ensure the device is put on the right VLAN or the right firewall groups based on the identity, the person who's using it as well, because we can talk to those identity sources and get that information. But obviously, a lot of those devices are non-IT devices. So then we have to start assessing, can we do some authentication to that IoT device? Can we go and scrape it, go and see if it's got any certificates, or what the vendor is, or does it belong in DNS? Does a DNS syntax sort of fit our standard? So there's lots of little tests we can go and do to try and validate these IoT devices are trusted, and then we make the decision. We trust it to join the network. We trust it to stay on the network. Otherwise, let's stick it into some sort of restricted VLAN, or even is it a rogue device? Let's not allow it on the network at all and stick it in some sort of quarantine VLAN, or put some segregation around it so it can't do any damage on the network.
Amazing, thanks, Mark. We also do as well, in partnership with CyberLab, a free IoT assessment as well, an OT assessment, which is great for sort of seeing that visibility. So again, as part of this, I guess, call to action, if you feel that would be beneficial to you, just kind of reach out to myself and the team at CyberLab, and we can maybe set that up for you as part of something that hopefully gives you that visibility like Mark talked about. Ines, from Logpoint, maybe your take on that question?
Yeah, so we're seeing more and more, certainly within education organisations, the proliferation of BOID technologies, not just laptops, but obviously tablets, smartphones, iPads, etc., and obviously other technologies within the IoT space. And it's typically becoming more and more challenging for organizations to really understand, who is connected to my infrastructure and what is the potential risk associated with that, and is there sensitive data residing in environments that are kind of beyond their control. This of course raises the risk of phishing attacks, exfiltration of data, among others. Using logs, NDR, UEBA, user and entity behavioral analytics, looking for anomalous behavior across these various devices and networks. But what is key is the ability to be able to do this at scale. We talk about sort of 15,000, 20,000, even 30,000 users in a typical sort of university environment. So we've got to be able to deliver that across numerous devices within and obviously at the edge of the organization's infrastructure. And Logpoint has, instances where we're monitoring in excess of, 30,000 devices without any great deal of challenge. And I guess the key and one of the great advantages of positioning SIEM is that it integrates with pretty much any security and infrastructure technology that an organization of this type would have deployed. So the ability to have contextualized information, the ability to be able to respond and remediate in real time is a critical element, a critical component of a educational organization's security posture.
Amazing, thanks Ines. And Darren from Secure Envoy.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Yes, as an identity and access management vendor, we are aware of some of the challenges from a BYOD and a user perspective. I think there's a number of challenges and considerations for the education authorities. Obviously, from a user side, they've got to consider not only students, teachers, employees, maybe ex-students on the type of devices and how they access systems. Some of the students, obviously, where they're using tablets, phones, other devices to get onto the machines. There's also considerations from the education authorities on the systems that they're using as well for that access, whether it's servers, those cloud applications, and the workstations as well that they provide. So it is a challenge, not only on the types of machine, how they're accessing it, but how they protect it as well. And I guess from our side, what we're helping the education authorities is a couple of ways. First of all is obviously we can protect how they access those machines, so we can enforce things like MFA for servers and workstations, for example, not only for the students but for the teachers as well. We can also define policies on when and how they access those machines, maybe during the day. So it's really locking down that policy access as well. And then the third thing as well is from the user side is what type of device can they actually use to authenticate and get onto that machine to again give more control to the education authorities. Some of the discussions we're having recently is there's a big push from education authorities to move away from using smartphones because of lack of control and security. That then introduces a question to education on how do they enforce authentication, what type of device they use. So it's about providing a flexible approach for their users, whether they're teachers or students, to log on and access those machines or use their devices. So we can provide things like soft tokens, but also hardware tokens, which is really popular at the moment within the education authority because they can't always use phones and they need to use some way of using a device to access those critical machines, whether it's their email or their system. So yes, we're aware from identity and access management, both the consideration from the type of user and the kind of machines that they're using to log on or access within the education authorities.
Amazing, thanks Darren. Yeah, and we actually do a live hack, which we sort of do at most of our live events, and how you sort of can bypass a standard MFA setup and how Secure Envoy helps sort of solve those challenges that we see. So if there's anything that anybody wants to maybe come and meet us in person at some of our events, you'll get to see that and sort of how our pen testers might sort of bypass a sort of standard MFA setup and how Darren and the team can help sort of prevent that from happening. So again, just something to consider if you are in the local area and want to sort of join us at any of our events. So the third question, so what role does automation and AI play and how can AI be used to protect institutions? So maybe Andy from Mimecast, if you want to sort of take that question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So when it comes to the ways in which AIs can make attacks more effective, we'll have to sort of like hone in on the day-to-day stuff, because we could book the rest of the day out and sit and have a few hours fireside chat about all the dangers. AI presents across various platforms today. But from a simple kind of day-to-day terms in email, one of the major concerns is that it makes it very easy to localize an email and to spell check an email, for example. So essentially just checking the language being used in that, checking the spelling on it, and then also checking the localization. So perhaps if it's aimed at a certain locality, then an AI, if it's well trained enough, would be able to use colloquialisms and even idioms and things like that. That might include some idioms, you know, into a message or something that makes it seem a lot more human, essentially, at the end of the day. And that's the major risk in email is AI making attacks, you know, easier to roll out at a much more believable level. But in terms of what AI can do to protect against this, then there's a lot that it can be doing. I'd say more to talk about in terms of what it can be doing in terms of, you know, to protect in terms of, instead of, excuse me, making the threats more believable. And then this is something that Mimecast has invested heavily in recently. And when we look at some of the ways in which AI can make attacks more believable, you know, compared to the way that it can protect, an AI, for example, can spot to see if you've received a message. It says it's from DHL. It looks like it's got DHL's branding and everything in the email. It looks quite believable, but the AI is able to spot that actually this is DHL's branding, but the message is coming from an email domain not owned by DHL. Yeah, it's able to go ahead and make that advanced check without a rule in place to tell it to do so. Same thing with payloadless attacks. An AI could actually take a payloadless attack and deconstruct it. It could stop it at the gateway and it could say to you, I stopped this message because, as you can see here, there's something wrong with the sending address. The subject is asking for some urgent financial information. And we can see certain instances of colloquialisms, idioms, and other language throughout there, which is trying to make the attack more believable and divert somebody into taking some sort of action, be that a transfer of bank details, providing credentials, etc., whatever it may be. So this is something that Mimecast is very heavily invested in, is making sure that wherever possible we can do things like spot the use of AI in fake login pages, payloadless attacks, etc., to make an email security gateway much more robust and ready for the modern world.
Amazing. Yeah. John from Sophos?
I'd certainly concur with Andy with regards to the way that the cyber criminals are using AI. It is primarily to get over the problem that, typically speaking, English isn't their first language. So that's the most common use from the attacker side of things. From a defense perspective, artificial intelligence certainly does have a place. We at Sophos have been using artificial intelligence to detect malware, for example, for a very long time. And fortuitously, cyber criminals are not typically great innovators. And what that means is the ability for artificial intelligence to group characteristics together, recognize that something is 90% the same as something else that it saw the other day that was, for example, makes it relatively easy to detect common variants of malware. However, having said that, the reality is that because of the vast resources that cyber criminals have at their disposal, including human resources, many of the attacks are actually human driven. And unfortunately, artificial intelligence is not really yet at the point where it is able to detect all of those attacks and actually contain them. Essentially, technology on its own simply isn't enough. And if you're going to combat a human, you probably do need to have another human, which is why we've invested so heavily in our managed detection and response service. Which is basically a team of cyber experts monitoring telemetry, looking at the state, looking at the information coming from those environments, contextualizing it, and doing something that only really humans can do, placing it into categories of risk and understanding where a threat needs to be contained and carrying out the appropriate action. Now, having said that, if we only relied on humans, we'd have to employ literally armies of people. So artificial intelligence has a great role at sifting through all the telemetry that it receives. So one of the great things about the Sophos MDR service is that we will take information and telemetry, not just from our own endpoints and servers and firewall products, for example, but also through a wide range of integrations with other vendors in the security space. So some of them actually on this call. So that means that if you've got a fabric of different security technologies in place, that we can still take the information, even though not all of those products are necessarily supplied by Sophos. Once we get all of that telemetry, there's a vast amount of information in there. Some of those security events are not important, particularly events where a threat has been seen and contained that doesn't need a human action. But where it gets really interesting is where we see interesting and suspicious events that require the human ability to contextualize. And artificial intelligence helps us to get through that noise very quickly and get the interesting events in front of a human analyst as fast as possible, because of course we all know time is of the essence in any kind of cyber attack. So AI is great at sifting through that noise, putting it in front of a human operative. What our platform is also really good at as well, I might add, is the ability then to group events together. Very rarely is a cyber attack contained from one source and to one destination. Typically, an attack on a network is going to involve the cyber criminals finding a vulnerable machine somewhere. Internet of Things, for example, we talked about earlier on, but then using that as a bridgehead to move around the estate. We often see cyber criminals getting in, we see them moving laterally, we see them escalating privileges and becoming administrators, for example. We see them exfiltrating data, we see them then ultimately encrypting data, all of which leaves this trail of breadcrumbs behind and often contains multiple log lines of information. Now, in order to make our analysts be able to see the big picture as fast as possible, artificial intelligence is also used very heavily in order to group events together. Because one of the classic problems with particularly a large environment like the education establishment is you're going to be inundated with alerts. Even a small event is going to create multiple layers of alerts. Condensing that down into a single notification and putting that in front of an analyst saying, essentially, here's your problem, this is what you need to go do about it, it speeds up the process very, very dramatically. So we estimate that going from an interesting event through to a case being put in front of a human analyst for further investigation under the Sophos MDR service, it typically takes just 1 minute. And there's no way you would achieve that with humans. That's very much in the realms of artificial intelligence. But yeah, just to re-emphasize, essentially, artificial intelligence is great. It will fend off most of the attacks. But in order to combat the sophisticated threat actors, particularly human actors, artificial intelligence and technology in general on its own just simply isn't enough, and you need human experts.
Yeah, and I if I may, just to very quickly to add to what John is saying there, and to very much agree with him on the subject of human error and you know the human element in there. You know, from the email perspective, we refer to the person at the end of that email as the human firewall, because at the end of the day, some stuff will eventually get through to them, and then they need to be trained in how to manage and handle that. And that is actually one of the ways in which AI can be used very intelligently, and one of the ways that we're looking to focus in using it at the moment at Mimecast is in terms of going, okay, well, you have a group of people that you've trained. How do you know that training has actually worked? And artificial intelligence can actually look at the training that they're given and compare that with their performance in phishing training, but also in actual live gateway. If you connect your training platform, your security platform, you can get statistics about when people click on live phishing attacks, for example, and not just simulated phishing attacks. And in order to, you know, to get this telemetry and put it all together and make sense of it and work out where people are better in certain areas, you know, maybe weak with phishing but stronger office hygiene, they need training in phishing. It's going to require a large team of people and take a very long time to put people in the right boxes and work out the training they need. Artificial intelligence can do that in seconds and can even automatically deliver the specific training that individuals need to get them up to, you know, an acceptable level of cybersecurity awareness.
Yeah, very good take. And I think what we're seeing today is multiple vendors working together, sort of layering tools together to create a sort of more comprehensive cybersecurity posture. But equally, that automation between vendors as well and sort of tools, I think we'll see an improvement there. So just you guys talking about it openly, it's quite easy to see where that path might go through AI as well. So Innes, log point, your take on things with, I know that SOAR is a big sort of factor in where you guys are heading and has been an instrumental part over the last couple of years, especially with some of the improvements there that I've seen anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So AI and machine learning is, you know, critical element of the LogPoint Converged SIEM platform. Firstly, in a couple of ways, right? So SOAR, as you mentioned, Adam, we live in a world of acronyms. LogPoint's no exception, I'm afraid. Stands for Security Orchestration and Response or Remediation, depending on who you're actually talking to in the industry. But, you know, effectively SOAR is based on what we call playbooks, and each playbook is a process flowchart, which effectively, you know, makes decisions from an AI and ML perspective. That could be aligned to a specific threat, such as phishing. That could be isolating a user isolating their email account or isolating a port within a firewall, whatever's required in that particular instance. And then secondly, LogPoint NDR uses AI to baseline normal network behavior and give effectively telemetry on unexpected behavior, including prevention within that environment. Okay, so it's almost like a UEBA technology kind of on steroids. It's doing this in absolute real time. So to give you an example of those two elements kind of working together, let's have a look at a phishing attack. Okay, it's been, Mimecast has identified a potential threat. This appears within the SIEM platform as an alert. This potentially kicks off a SOAR playbook, which then in turn reaches out to the integrated threat intel platform. We get a risk score associated with that, and then we triage that, and it's fully automated and summarized to the analyst within that environment. And everything in there can be fully automated, or it can ask for human intervention at times. So in addition, a kind of, a SOAR playbook is actually aligning to specific best practice within a security environment, as well as taking away a lot of that heavy lifting in terms of the investigation. And to give you an example, Gartner talk about a manual investigation into a phishing attack, taking something in the region of about 12 hours. The implementation of SOAR and NDR will literally take that down to minutes. And again, the NDR element will be looking at this potential threat, both from a network level and an infrastructure level, and looking at those anomalies.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you, Ines. I think we could talk about AI all day, and it's very interesting and where it's going to go and the advancements we're going to see. But I think, that topic could go on for hours. So I think another event is coming up soon, and we'll get talking more into AI and where those advancements are coming. The fourth question, so how can educational institutions reinforce the security that comes with the Microsoft products? And I guess supporting and complementing Microsoft is where I see the market sort of shifting at the moment. So maybe Andy from Mimecast, if you want to sort of take that question.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the key things to recognize here is that whoever you're talking about, I mean, currently I'm talking about the idea of, complementing Microsoft with Mimecast, but it doesn't really matter what technology we're talking about. The key thing is not to put all your eggs in one basket. And in fact, actually a few years back, one of our large customers who was saved from a major email outage during an extremely important event tweeted that exact same thing. I'm really glad I bought Mimecast because I didn't put all my technological eggs in one electronic basket, basically. And from a practical perspective, Microsoft is your email provider. And so therefore, if Microsoft has outages or problems or they go down, then your entire email goes down. And if your email and your security goes down with it, then you are left, in a very difficult situation. You need to have some sort of high availability array. You need to have some kind of backup for your email and some backup for your security in order to make sure that the emails processed during an outage or something like that are actually maintain their integrity and are secured. So this is kind of one of the main things. It's much more sensible objectively to take your email security and place it in somewhere which acts potentially also as a backup. So somewhere that can provide you a continuity solution that Mimecast can, so that in the event that Microsoft goes down, for example, Mimecast could act as your email provider for you, but then also provide you a full suite of security products too. And then also when we just look at, going to the right person for the right thing, the right tool for the right job, to extend that metaphor. So Microsoft do have some good security products, but that's not basically their bread and butter. That's not what they do primarily. Now, I want to be very careful here. I'm not going to encourage everybody to go out and buy 6 different off-the-shelf products that specifically do one thing and then try and run them all together. You run in a complexity problem, which is something that education institutions that I speak to are all suffering from. They're all suffering from a complexity problem. They're trying to solve something with 3 or 4 different subscriptions. That means 3 or different support teams, 3 different renewal dates. That managing that complexity is becoming extremely difficult. So definitely not suggesting that, but from the perspective of taking a security platform, someone that can provide you backup in the event your email goes down, but also great email security, can hold copies of all of your email and also provide your training as well. So as I mentioned earlier, the benefit of bundling your training and your email security is that you get threat intelligence about what people do with their email in the real world, not just what they will do with it in a simulated situation. So yeah, there's many different reasons there, but I think one of the major efficacy ones, Mimecast email security risk assessment from last year found, so this is us essentially processing email that Microsoft as deems as safe from people coming to us thinking that they might like to purchase our services, but wanting to know how we stand up against Microsoft. For every 1 million emails delivered by Microsoft's advanced security, 87,205 were bad or unwanted. So that's more than 1 in 11 emails that we found that our security solution would have stopped, whereas theirs would have let through and left dormant in a user's mailbox. So I think that's definitely one of the major arguments there.
Yeah, definitely. And we do a lot of assessments around Microsoft as well at CyberLab, where we can maybe sort of, for budget purposes, you might want to maximize and see where you're spending, if it's E3, E5 licenses. And then what we see is typically a lot of organizations might go with, say, E3 and then start to layer some of the tools that we're talking about today to sort of complement Microsoft, but also get the best of both worlds. So again, just sort of a little bit similar to what Andy was saying there. So Mark, at Forescout, maybe your take on working and sort of complementing the Microsoft products?
Yeah, we actually love customers who have Microsoft products. It enhances our capability massively, which is a great benefit. So Forescout has a partnership with Microsoft, which results in us having some really strong integrations and bi-directional integrations with things like Azure, Intune, Defender, Sentinel, and this enables us to make some better decisions and enhanced decisions, but based on the information those tool sets can share with us. As I mentioned, Forescout allows our customers to build a trust model, which decides what devices are allowed to join the network, stay on the network, whereabout they sit on that network as well. That could be based on whether the device is an institute-owned device, or it could be a BOYD device. It doesn't really matter. Or it may be a rogue device, right? So we can stick that in some sort of restricted VLAN, somewhere like that. But when we start to enhance this trust model with those Microsoft toolings, we can then add different capabilities, enhance that capability. For example, when the device joins a network, maybe you want to go and ask Intune, is this device enrolled in Intune? Is it compliant with the Intune policies? So that way we can say, oh, okay, well, this is a corporate device, we are going to allow it onto the network, or it's not. Let's let it drop down our trust model to try and work out what type of device it actually is. But then we could also, based on the devices we allow join the network via certificates, for example, then we could then say to Defender, what is the state? What do you know about this device? Does it have any critical vulnerability sitting on it? Because that may make a decision, help us make a decision. We're going to move this device off the sort of the core network and go and stick it into some sort of remediation VLAN or raise a support ticket, things like that. Because, okay, it joined, it proved it was part of our network, but it's not in a good state. It doesn't have a good security posture. So we want to make sure that we go and remediate it quickly, because it's got some really critical CVEs that may be being tracked by CISA now, right? So it allows us to do that sort of stuff. Also, Sentinel, we can obviously feed a lot of not only Sentinel but other SIMs as well, right? we can feed a lot of really good asset intelligence into those tool sets. So when you're doing those one of those playbooks, understanding what that exploit or that threat actually is, maybe it's an exploit that's targeting a particular application or something on an endpoint. Through the asset intelligence, you can identify, well, actually that asset doesn't even have the application on it. It's not vulnerable to it. It's a false positive. So you can straight away help with those processes, those mandrolic processes within those SOC tool sets, and then also allow you to make remediation activities for them. So maybe you wanted from Sentinel, go and tell Forescout to go and remediate that, put it into a VLAN, go and run some sort of remediation process on that endpoint as well. Especially if it's a managed endpoint, we can do all kinds of activities based on those, Microsoft Defender, or install an agent, remove an agent, all those kinds of enable a firewall, enable BitLocker, all those kinds of things. So Forescout can do host-based remediations and network-based remediations, all triggered from those SIEM tools like Sentinel and Logarithm and others.
Yeah, great answer, Mark. That was very interesting. Darren from Secure Envoy, your take on things?
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Yes, obviously with Secure Envoy being an MFA and access management vendor, we've certainly seen an increasing level of discussions from the education sector, especially over the last 12, 18 months. I think education authorities, whether they're schools, colleges, academic trusts, universities, are really looking at enhancing their identity access for a number of reasons. And obviously, they do initially look at Microsoft, who does provide a range of services in that area. But as some of the colleagues on the panel have mentioned already, it's not one size doesn't fit all. And I think there's some considerations and challenges that they do have when just going for Microsoft. So I guess we can obviously complement Microsoft, or we can work standalone depending on the requirements. And I think from an MFA perspective, there are considerations for the education authorities. Number one would be, are they cloud or on-prem? Obviously, Microsoft has very much a focus on cloud first for those authorities. We're still talking to a lot of education authorities that aren't in a cloud-based system and still have on-premise applications. So that's number one, one key area. Another key area would be Microsoft has a real focus on protecting things like Office 365, for example, and maybe VPN. But we're seeing a lot of discussions from customers that, they have workstations, they have servers. I think one of the panel mentioned about RDP connections. We have a lot of project requirements at the moment where education authorities, whether they're already using Microsoft, are looking to enforce MFA for those servers and RDP connections as well. And then the third aspect would be that user approach. Again, Microsoft has a real focus on sort of smartphone app authentication. And as we mentioned in one of the earlier discussions, is that when we're talking to our clients, not everyone has a phone or want to use the phone. So whether you're trying to authenticate, teachers, employees, students, you need to provide a flexible approach. So yes, we do an app ourselves, but we also provide other methods for that user environment. So we can do hardware tokens, we can do desktop tokens to provide a flexible approach. So these education authorities now can protect all their key applications, whether it's those external resources like VPN or Office 365, but also those internal systems, such as RDP and servers, for example. And then in addition to that, with the new DFE compliance requirement that came out at the beginning of the year within the MFA standards, it does mention now that organizations have to look at protecting MFA for those internal resources and enable their users more flexible approach to authentication. And we are already seeing quite a few projects, especially over the last 6 months, as education authorities now look at that compliance driver and look how they meet those requirements. Whether they've got Microsoft or they want to complement it, we can help with either scenario.
Amazing. 3 great answers there. Yeah, it was very, very interesting to hear your view on that. So thank you. Final question. So with limited IT budgets and resource in education, what practical advice would you give to schools to effectively implement cybersecurity solutions? So maybe John from Sophos, how you're sort of helping with that challenge?
Absolutely. So the biggest challenge universally is a lack of skills when it comes to things like human-led threat hunting. I talked at length already about the fact that technology on its own simply isn't enough. So in order to really maximize your ability to stay safe from cyber criminals, it really is imperative to consider how your organization is equipped to do those threat hunts, and whether it's actually more sensible to be looking at partnering with a cybersecurity vendor like Sophos, such that we can help you with looking at the telemetry, looking at your estate. And actually coming back to your question you just asked about Microsoft, for example, one of the great things with the open architecture that we offer is that we can take telemetry from the whole Microsoft suite of products and feed that into our managed detection response service. Microsoft is so omnipresent that it would be foolish to try and protect an organization and ignore the telemetry that comes from those sources. So we take information from Azure, for example, from Entra ID, from Office 365, and if you're running Windows Defender, that's okay as well. Even if Sophos isn't the endpoint, and you're choosing Windows Defender, we can still take the telemetry from there. And this really illustrates the fact that you can really maximize the security investments you've already made by taking that information, then having a dedicated team of experts at Sophos actually then help you wade through all of that telemetry and understand where you're likely to be in the early stages of an attack. You know, it's really important to understand that we don't see attacks popping up immediately. There is always a trail of breadcrumbs beforehand. And if we take the information that we see and we can detect that, for example, a cyber criminal's got in, they've moved laterally, they've escalated privilege, these are all stages along the way. And if we can just break the attack chain at that point, then we lead to better security outcomes by stopping the really bad stuff happening. And on the subject of integrations, probably one of the most exciting new things that we've added in is an integration with backup and recovery vendors. We consistently see that the cyber criminals will go after your backups as part of an attack chain. You know, it kind of stands to reason if you're going to hold an organization to ransom by encrypting their data, those victim organizations are never going to pay out if they've got a backup sitting there waiting to restore. So effectively, the backup is the key target for cyber criminals in the early stages of an attack. In fact, again, our research tells us that 97% of ransomware attacks, the backups are actually targeted as part of that attack chain. So having the integration with backup and recovery vendors telling us that the cyber criminals are going after the backup I always liken it to the canary in the coal mine. It's the flag, it's the indicator, early stage. It tells us we're about to see something more significant taking place.
Amazing, yeah, that's such a great take. And I think is it Veeam? I think you've partnered with for the backup integration as well.
Yeah.
I can see that's one of them on your sort of, list. So again, it's something that is if you can't see that and have that visibility, again, it's a big threat. And yeah, I think seeing people work together and vendors work together, hopefully you can see that from today's call. It's definitely going to help with those challenges. Ines from Logpoint, your take?
Yeah, I think the biggest take we have through our sort of conversations with schools, you know, community colleges, universities, etc., you know, it kind of boils down to budget, right? You know, have they got the budget? Have they got the resources internally, and have they got the level of expertise to be able to align to the variety of different technologies that they're you know, deploying within their environment, and that's critical. They can have the best security provision you know, that money can buy, but without the expertise to potentially respond to these environments or these different technologies, it you know, can almost seem useless to some point. And I think this is where it lies. You know, the critical element of being able to you know, respond and remediate, whether or not that's delivered by you know, a security partner that's delivering MDR or triage or, you know, outcome-based technologies, is becoming more and more a kind of critical element for organizations where, you know, kind of security is paramount, but they're lacking these other elements such as, you know, your budget, your resources, your you know, level of expertise within the environment. And they want to keep their infrastructure safe, and they want to keep the students, the kids safe as well. So it's becoming more and more challenging for these types of organizations to be able to deploy this. You know, to talk to Microsoft there to some extent, you know, Logpoint does integrate with the entire suite, so we can you know, effectively ingest logs from Defender, Entra, you know, Office 365, whatever that might look like. But the key part there is that they've invested a huge amount of money in their E5 licensing. If they're deploying Sentinel, it becomes cost prohibitive once they start talking around, you know, retention of logs, all those different elements which aren't necessarily transparent in the you know, service level agreement that they kind of signed up for. So that's a huge consideration when you start sort of scratching the surface of SIEM and what are effectively the costs that are going to be associated with it. My advice, I guess, in terms of you know, schools, colleges, universities, when it's aligned to budget, is prioritize your budget. You know, weigh the risk. You know, look at industry intelligence, case studies, obviously. Logpoint has a very specific education pricing model, which is effectively an enterprise license, which is a fixed cost specifically aligned to that educational organisation.
Amazing, thanks, Ines. So just to wrap things up, thank you very much, gents, for your time today. I think that's super interesting. I could sit here all day and talk to you. And if you'd like to find more information on any topics discussed today or CyberLab events near you, please visit our website at cyberlab.co.uk/events. We do have an upcoming event with Lancaster University, as discussed earlier in the call, and also Manchester Metropolitan event coming soon. We can actually also provide anybody on the call a free posture assessment. So there will be a QR on screen now, which also helps with those budget challenges and where to sort of maybe align budget using the NCSE's 10-step guide to good cybersecurity practices. And equally, we're free to talk to students and staff around careers in cyber and sort of helping that next generation of cyber professionals. I do quite a lot of talks in schools and colleges and universities in terms of how I got into cybersecurity. I find it really interesting. I'm very passionate about it. And equally, there's a wider team here, whether it's pen testers or engineers, in terms of how they got into the world of cybersecurity. So a big thank you to everyone that's joined us today. We do have a podcast as well. So if you are interested in listening to more of topics like we've just discussed today, please subscribe. But I'd just like to say a big thank you to everybody and have a great day. Thank you.